Always check your children's Halloween candy. Always. I'm not saying this to fearmonger, just to tell you the truth. I realize that most of the candy handed out to the holidays is likely purchased at Walmart the day before and shoved into a plastic pumpkin-shaped bowl. You probably have realized that most sane people don't poison candy or put glass in it, or whatever cautionary urban legend you've heard. The only guy who did do that did so to his own son. So those neighbors of yours, don't treat them like criminals. They're just trying to innocently give the kiddos some sweets. This warning regards to a phenomena that has no apparent origin. What I mean is, no one really sure of where it comes from. The candy in question isn't even so. You can't purchase it in any store, and looking it online results in no results. The candy, this aforementioned phenomena, appears to be that of a cinnamon jawbreaker, not to be confused with the Atomic Fireball brand or any other similar sweets. It may resemble a red-tinted gumball or a red lollipop with no stick. The point being, it's rather generic in appearance, which makes it tricky to spot the real deal. The candy is sometimes branded under the H.H. Sweet Company, a corporation that doesn't exist. At least, no one registered in any agency since 1999. If you search the internet, you might find some H.H. Sweets businesses, but I assure you, they aren't the real deal, merely a namesake coincidence. If the label carries the H.H. name, beneath the tagline will read something of the effect of, "Hot as hell, sweet as heaven." Not all the candy sports the branding, but it certainly helps to spot it. This is why I advise if you find yourself or your kids with an unmarked red candy, the safest bet is to throw the suckers away. The documentation of the phenomena only dates back to 2007, but there is a possibility that it's gone on far longer. As of this recording, I've known 9 people have ingested the candy, 4 which being children under the age of 18. Each case happened in October 31st, which in most cases occurred during 2016. With a total of 3 victims. The only clue as to candy's appearance and branding is through the eyewitnesses and subsequent investigation of any nearby or open candy wrappers. Each of the victims' corpses, aside from the head, remain untouched. The head, however, are where things get strange. Each of the heads is completely burnt, like a used match. This would make identifications of the victims troublesome, except for the fact that fingerprint analysis lent itself fittingly to the nature of these deaths, considering the hands of the deceased were completely intact. None of the victims were related in any way, with the only exception being a father of his 9-year-old daughter, Andy and Marie Kay Winfield, from Lexington, Virginia. All the others shared no relations, other than the aforementioned candy. An eyewitness report from Brevard, North Carolina, documented the full story behind the mysterious death of a 12-year-old boy, Shane Davis, who died on the Halloween of 2009. I was leaving the pharmacy around 8:30 when it happened. He, Davis, was walking down the block in a zombie costume. I didn't even notice him at first because it was dark, and the costume was dark. But then there was a flash of orange light, like someone lit a candle. I turned around and the heat wave hit me in the face, and the smell. Oh Lord, it smelled like cooked meat. His his head was on fire. There was people screaming, but there was nothing we could do. He screamed only for a moment, and then he hit the pavement. I'll never unsee that. There were rumors that it was a hex from the witch or something. I'm not a superstitious man, but when you see something like that, superstition doesn't seem too far off, you know? Similar reports were documented for many of the other victims. Shortly after ingestion of the candy, the victim's head would burst into flames, and soon after the victims would succumb to the injury and die. Many rumors and theories have since popped up surrounding death and candy. Many include witches and spells, but some are garnered significant following beyond regional folklore. One of the most popular rumors city of deaths and the results in 1782 execution of Henry Hazen Cassidy, H.H. Cassidy, a candy maker from Onacock, Virginia, the site of the first documented death from 2007. Cassidy, a local candy maker, was placed on trial for the disappearance of 2 young girls from the neighborhood town. Despite having no apparent motive for abducting two young girls, the candy maker was charged as a reasonable suspect, having access to sweets for alluring the children. Following the local investigation where one of the girls' bodies was discovered with candy in her pocket, Cassidy was charged with the murders and sentenced to death. Children from the town who once loved the sweets made the candy maker began calling Cassidy the Witch of Onakok, making him one of the earliest male witches of legend. Being found guilty in a hasty trial, Cassidy was sentenced to death by molten metal, a process considered barbaric, except in the case of accused witch. Cassidy, who swore his innocence until his death, had a molten level ball dropped into his throat. While a quick death, it was certainly not painless. The townsfolk remarked the justice as served of that day, and the body was buried in a shallow grave. Given that Andy and Marie K. Wingfield were also from Virginia, May speculated that the spirit of Cassidy returned to punish those responsible for his death, using his signature candy as a way to torment the descendants of the accusers. The name, too, H.H. Cassidy, would explain the name of the rappers, H.H. Sweets. Another popular theory is usually referred to the Jack-o'-lantern story, based on an Irish myth. The story goes that the man named Stingy Jack tricked the devil on multiple occasions, resulting in his banishment from hell, and as well as heaven, as he was a trickster at heart. The man, forced to roam the earth, lit coal within a turnip and has been using it ever since to light his eternal path. The story, clearly rooted in the Halloween tradition of the carving jack-o'-lanterns, have been used to explain the candy too. Stingy Jack, as he refers, seeks out the souls to join him in eternal punishment. The candy, which burns the head of its consumers, turned them into somewhat crude jack-o'-lantern. This would explain the fiery demise of the victim, as well as it continues the celebration of Halloween. In conjunction with Stingy Jack narrative, there are some who concluded that the candy is the work of the devil himself, tormenting unsuspecting holiday celebrators with death merely for the fun of it. A rather sick trick, yes, but then again, mischief is a commonplace for a celebration of Halloween. As for this theory, the HH label would stand in the Hell's Hottest or something variation of Hell's Illiteration. Despite these various backstories of the candy, there are far more grounded explanations that many have subscribed to, rather than reading into H.H. Sweet's mythology, which concludes that H.H. Sweet is precisely what it claims to be, a candy company. The motive of committing these crimes is at large still a mystery, but these theories cut out the claims of ghosts and devils, suggesting instead of the selecting few sickos of the willpower to conjure up sweets with the intent to kill. In the end, not one theory is correct, at least not the one that's confirmed by tradition means. A candy that is, for lack of better terms, supernatural, can only be explained by the supernatural, making it extremely difficult to verify any information regarding it. If you wish to avoid a grisly result of the candy, I'd advise to always check your children's Halloween candy. Better yet, avoid the trick-or-treating tradition altogether. Or, if you're highly concerned, perhaps it would be best to simply skip Halloween together. The first Halloween after everyone died was as uneventful as you would expect. I ran naked through the streets eating stolen candy, and I drunkenly singing Monster Mash. It's the sort of thing that you do when everyone in the world is dead and you've lost everything that matters. Of course, there is no you. There's only me. There's only ever me. The one the sickness left behind to suffer. The second Halloween after everyone died, I was planning to end things the coming new year. I sat in the ruins of a rich person's home. I think he'd been a doctor or a lawyer or something. I wore his crimson silk bathrobe. I smoked the cigars, and I was living what remained of someone else's good life. Then I heard a knock on the door, but of course I didn't. That would have been impossible. Except it happened again. I made my way to the big carved oak door. I slowly turned the brass knob and pulled. A 4-foot-tall mummy stood before me in the doorway. There was a line of other children in various costumes. They stretched halfway down the block. "Trick or treat," was all the ghost in the mummy costume said before I slammed the door in the 10-year-old face. I watched through the blinds as the dead children walked off disappointed. I half expected them to throw eggs or toilet paper, but one by one, they faded out in the world until there was nothing but shadows and empty air where they had once been. I guess it's true what they say about when they said the veil between this shithole and the next being thinner on Halloween. It's either that or I've gone insane. I'm probably not insane. Reality is a sharp knife, which I feel all the time. Anyway, as the old song goes, the year kept coming and they don't stop coming. Each Halloween, the children would arrive at my door in their costumes. I sit in the darkness and wait for them to leave. Eventually, the children would have head off disappointed. I've been alone in the world again. The dead would be dead. No more uncomfortable reminders of lost hopes and dreams. This year was different. Maybe it's the loneliness that got into me. Maybe I've come to accept that I will be a ghost in the not so distant future. Maybe I just miss the way things used to be. This year, I journeyed into the remains of what was once a grocery store. After much searching, I found what I was looking for. I carried it home. The "it" in question was a massive bag of caramel and green apple suckers. These were the sort I used to freaking love as a kid. My aunt would give them to me if I stayed still, and I didn't cry while she cuts my hair. This year, when the kids arrived, I was standing in the doorway of that dilapidated mansion holding a big bowl of suckers. I even donned a pair of plastic vampire fangs I found in the closet. The kids came up to me one by one or in pairs. I would compliment their costumes. They thanked me for the candy. There weren't any talk of what happened to them or the world. It didn't matter anymore. Everything was as it was supposed to be. Then the children went away. They were always going to do that. The ghosts in my mind are now my only company. Still, there's always next year. I'll be alright. Happy Halloween, I whispered to myself as I stared drunkenly at the ceiling. Maybe next year one of those smiling faces will belong to my son. He always liked those suckers too. Considering how much crap people give this movie, it honestly isn't that bad, Mark said while taking another sip of his beer. His wife, Claire, took another fistful of popcorn from her bowl. Just you wait, this one of my favorite parts coming up. In the next scene, a boy wearing a pumpkin mask watched a flashing jack-o'-lantern on the television while the silly theme played in the background. Just as the mask began to rot and the kid fell into the ground, Claire heard the doorbell ring. She grunted with disappointment and set the bowl of popcorn down on the coffee table. Right where it was getting to one of the best scenes, she said with a slight hint of disappointment in her voice. Claire stood up from the couch and walked towards the front door. While doing so, she grabbed a bowl of candy from the kitchen counter, as well as her witch hat. She placed a cheap cone on her head and made sure it was lopsided. As soon as she opened the front door, she was greeted with a delightful high-pitched scream of small children. "Trick or treat!" They all yelled in unison as the ear-pitching pitch. "My, oh my, aren't you a scary little bunch?" Susan exclaimed while extending the bowl in front of them. She allowed each kid to take 2 pieces. Most of them immediately went for the good stuff, like Snickers and Reese's. Just as she expected, none of the children went from the Almond Joys that they had come in the various bag. She didn't really mind, however. They were her favorite, and it meant more for her in the end of the night. "Stay safe, children, and please be careful. This is a busy street, so watch out for cars." "Yes, ma'am," the group retorted while turning and running down the cobblestone path that snaked through the yard. One of the children covered in zombie makeup turned to his head and he ran and yelled, "Thank you." Claire smiled and waved goodbye to the children as they ran down the driveway and into the sidewalk. As she watched them take off towards the next house, she caught sight of her neighbor walking across the street. The two exchanged a friendly wave. The woman and her daughter glanced up and down the street before running across it and in Claire's front door. "Happy Halloween, Margaret," Claire said while holding out the candy bowl for her daughter. "You know, I've been looking up and down the street for you. I'm guessing Mark went out for Tommy tonight?" Margaret's daughter, Elizabeth, shuffled through the candy in the bowl and attempted to get one of those satisfying her cravings. "Tommy actually went out with some friends from school. He was begging us all month to do it. I was a little skeptical, but Mark was the one that pointed out that we need to let him off the leash a little bit. We came to a compromise that he couldn't go past Jefferson Street." Elizabeth squealed with delight as she finally found the Twix bar among the pieces of candy. She placed it into her bag and went back to scavenge through the bowl for another one. We also put a tracker app on his phone just to make sure he listens. He's never really been a problem with this sort of thing, but I just wanted to be safe. They both looked down as Elizabeth made it to the known in the world that she has found 2 more Twix bars. The two of us need to get going. If we see Tommy anywhere he's not supposed to be, I'll give you a call. The two women hugged, and Margaret took her daughter by the hand. As they walked down the driveway and into the sidewalk, Claire looked on with a smile. The two of them passed in front of her house and further down the street. Just as Claire stepped back inside, she caught sight of something on her neighbor's yard. A child stood near the edge of the grass. Claire guessed it was just a 10-year-old from his size. His small frame was covered in a pair of dark blue coveralls. They were easily 2 sizes too big. His face was hidden by a Michael Myers mask that was meant to be worn by an adult, causing it to appear almost comedically large on the boy's head. An orange plastic bag filled with a small amount of candy hung by his side from the small fist. She assumed it was John's kid considering he was standing in the yard. "Do you want some candy, Robert?" The boy stood completely silent and motionless. He simply continued to stare at her with the hollow black eye holes of the mask. Claire had never really known Robert to be a talkative boy, so this hardly surprises her. Claire shrugged and shut the door behind her. She rested the bowl of the candy back on the kitchen counter and plopped down on the cushions of the couch. Just as she found the perfect comfortable position, Mark nudged her. "Would you mind grabbing me another beer?" She glared at him with an exhausted look. "You have no self-reliance, do you?" Just like many other times in the past, Mark flashed her a pitiful look. "Please?" he asked in a mocking child voice. Claire grabbed the empty bottle from his hand and stood up from the couch. "God, you're insufferable," she said with a laugh. Claire walked in the kitchen and threw open the door of the refrigerator. As she grabbed one bottle, she figured that she might as well get one for herself. As she placed it on the counter and opened a drawer to retrieve a bottle opener, something caught her attention. Just outside the kitchen window, she saw a shadow fly across the grass in the soft glow of their security light. She leaned closer to the glass that had frosted around the edge from the chill of the night air. A few dead leaves tumbled across the grass as she scanned the yard of the source of the movement. Her attention suddenly diverted to the front door. She left the bottles on the counter and grabbed the bowl of candy once more. As she flung open the door, she was not greeted with the familiar cheers of small children like every other time that night. Her front doorstep was empty. She glanced at her driveway to find no one in sight. It was not until she looked near the edge of her lawn that something caught her attention. The boy in the Michael Myers mask was standing near the hedge of the border of Claire's yard. He stood completely still in the green glow of the Halloween light that emits from the front landscape. At this point, Claire knew that this was not a neighbor's kid. Although Robert rarely talked, she knew that he was not one to pull pranks like this. She attempted to see any details of his face through the holes in the mask, but to no avail. "Look, I don't know who you are, but either take some candy or get out of here." She held out the bowl in his direction. The boy tilted his head and one side of the Halloween lights changed to the shade of purple. He then pivoted to his heels and walked down her lawn towards the street. He vanished around the hedge and out of her sight. "Little weirdo," Claire muttered to herself while opening the almond joy and popped it in her mouth. As she sits the candy bowl back in the kitchen counter, Mark called for her in the perch of her living room. "Who are you yelling at?" "Some kid who was standing in our yard. I saw him across the street in Johnson's yard a few minutes ago." "Well, did you offer him any candy?" "Yeah," Claire responded while popping a cap off her beer. "All he did was stare at me and walked off." "Good thing I'm here to protect you, honey." She rolled her eyes while walking back to the living room. "My ass," Claire said, shoving the beer bottle in his hand. She tousled his hair and sat down on the couch. With the popcorn bowl resting back in her lap, Claire picked up the handful and happily put it in her mouth. She turned her head to find her dog standing in the back door, waiting to be let in. "Oh, come on." Giving up her seat once again, Claire dragged her feet from the back door and slid it open. The black lab pranced inside in delight and vanished into the kitchen to search for scraps. In its wake, a few leaves blew in through the door. Claire quickly rounded them up and tossed them back outside. As she looked out over the yard, She noticed the boy in the Michael Myers mask standing amongst the trees, then backed up to the fence. "Hey, what the hell are you doing back there?" There was no response. "Mark, you better get over here." Her husband grunted as he stood up from the couch and lumbered in her direction. Using the door frame for support, he leaned over and stuck his head out. "I'll tell you one thing, that isn't the Johnson's boy. Robert is a couple of inches shorter than that and a few pounds heavier." At this point, Claire blew air from her nostrils and pinched her bridge of her nose in frustration. "At this point, I don't care who the hell it is. I just want him out of here. If it means calling neighborhood security, then so be it." Mark stepped outside with his bare feet smacking on the flagstone patio. He stood right on the edge where he met the grass. His shadow loomed over the yard as he blocked some of the light coming from the inside of the house. "Either you leave, or we'll call security. You got that?" The boy stood motionless and refused to answer. "Are you deaf or something? Get out of here!" This time the boy moved. He rested an orange candy bag down in the pine straws and opened it. Reaching inside, a black handle of the kitchen knife emerged from the bag. The blade reflected on the moonlight and bounced it back in a direction. "Holy shit!" Mark immediately threw his beer bottle straight at the child. It hurled through the air before shattering and the large shrunk against his head. His small body slumped and fell to the ground with a soft thud. "Mark, what the hell is wrong with you?" Claire cried as she ran through the doorway. "You saw that. The kid had a fucking knife. He might have a concussion now, thanks to you. Do you want to have an assault charges brought on us or the kid's parents? I doubt they would do anything to us when they realize that the kid is carrying a knife around. Just look at the size of that thing." Mark turned as he pointed in the boy's direction. To his shock, the child was gone. All that remains was the dark brown glass of his beer shattered among the landscape. "Where'd he go?" Mark asked while stumbling backwards towards the house. Claire took a few steps back herself and fumbled the phone in her pocket. "That's it, I'm calling the cops." Mark followed her back inside and locked the door behind them. As the blue and white colors emitted from the television danced around the room, Claire dialed 911 and spoke with the dispatcher. Although difficult at times, she managed to keep the panic from seeping into her tone. "There'll be an officer here in about 6 minutes." Her phone suddenly rang, causing her to jump. Looking down at the screen, she was met by the contact phone of her son dressed up as Dr. Strange that he had taken that very afternoon. "Tommy?" "Hey Mom, I'm almost home. Is it okay if my friends come over a few minutes and watch some movies? They had to go change because we slipped in mud." At this point, her son's messy clothes were the least of her concerns. "That's fine, dear. Just please hurry home." "All right, see you soon," he said with the light, and the call ended with a beep. Claire shoved the phone back into her pocket and looked at her husband. Mark was staring out in the kitchen window with his nose pressed against the glass. "Any sign of the kid?" "Nothing yet," he said while turning towards the backyard. "It's like he just disappeared into thin air." There was a knock on the door that caused both of them to jump. Claire breathed a sigh of relief and quickly walked towards the door. She threw open the door and greeted her son with a sigh of relief as the cool night air flooded inside. "I'm so glad you're home." The door was empty, save for a few bugs that danced around the overhead lights. Claire panicked and began frantically looking from side to side. "Tommy?" she called into the cool night air. Stepping forward, she was met with an unsettling crunch under her foot. She slowly looked down to find a piece of plastic cracked under her shoe. As she lifted her foot, she recognized it of a magical shield that had come from a Tommy's costume. A knot formed in her stomach, and she began to lose her balance. Propping herself against the doorframe, she called for her husband. Mark?" He came barreling down the hallway at an instant. "Is he out there again?" Mark followed his wife's eyes down to the ground, where he saw a piece of shattered plastic resting on the concrete. The color drained from his face. "I'm grabbing my gun." Before Claire could stop him, the husband had fled through their room to retrieve the firearm from the top shelf of their closet. As she watched him disappear around the corner, she heard a noise coming from the driveway. It sounded like something falling on the pavement. She timidly approached the driveway and peered around the back of her car. She was met with nothing but the sight of an empty sidewalk. She creeped closer to the street. and was surprised to feel her foot slip in something. She glanced down to find a small puddle of blood near the back of her tire of an SUV. Her shoes had smeared some of it across the driveway in the dark crimson streak. Tommy's cell phone lay on the concrete with the screen cracked. Claire's contact was still pulled up on the phone app. "Mark!" she screamed at the top of her lungs. Within a matter of seconds, her husband came running through the front door with a pistol in his grasp. As he came closer to her, she pointed the puddle illuminated under the slicky yellow glow from the streetlight. Mark wrapped her arm tightly around his wife and pulled her away from it, as she broke from his grasp and ran towards the street. As Claire glanced further down the sidewalk, she could see a trail of blood illuminated under the streetlight that dotted their way down the road. She felt her head spin, and her knees began to weaken. She soon fell to the ground and began to sob. Mark rushed to her side and bent down to cradle her. "Tommy!" She continued to scream her son's name into the cool night air, only to have it echo back as if the world was taunting her. As her cries carried up and down the street, her hot tears ran down her cheeks. Mark held her tighter as the two were bathed in the red and blue glow of the approaching police car. Claire's voice continued to pierce the night, only to be lost in the howling wind.